Okay, we are at 5 after. So how about we get this kicked off? And hello, everybody. My name is David Justice. You are at the TAG Runtime Wasm Working Group meeting. We follow the CNCF Code of Conduct. So roughly that means be kind to each other. Please raise your hand to be recognized, and you will. If you have agenda items, please add them to the meeting notes, which should be linked in chat. And if you need it, please let me know. As of right now, I see there is one item being added to the agenda. While that's being added, perhaps if anybody has any PSAs they would like to share in the meantime. Anything on anybody's mind?
I mean, I wish there was, but so many of us are heads down on P3 right now, which I mean, I guess is an announcement in and of itself. But um, yeah, we're all pretty busy in here.
What's this P3 thing you speak of?
Preview 3 or 0.3 or whatever you want to call it. Anyway, it's going to be futures and async and all that stuff for Wasm. So we're planning on having I think Calvin had reached out to them. I had that as a follow-up later about having some of the folks come over to talk about Preview 3. So anyway, there's that. And then yeah, we have a bunch of those. But yes, that's the good stuff to talk about. I feel like there's something else too, but I'll remember and put it down when we get to the news section.
All right, fantastic. Thank you. It looks like we do have agenda items in there. So, without further ado, the anonymous person who put WASI TLS Phase 1, please speak up.
Yeah, that was me. I was just announcing we took WASI TLS to the working group a couple weeks ago, and they voted and to move it to phase 1, and we've published the first draft of that. It's very minimal. It doesn't have a whole lot in it right now. It's based off of some of the work that Joel Dice had done and I'd done with .NET. And I'm currently working on a implementation inside Wasm-time. So more to come on that, but just wanted to let folks know that that's being worked on here.
Awesome. Quick question. So, is that WASI like thread local storage? What is that?
Yeah, yes, that's common mistake. No, it's the transport security layer, TLS. So being able to encrypt your data when it's traveling across the wire. There is a thread local storage that's under the shared everything thread proposal. And so if you're looking for that particular acronym.
Thank you so much for explaining that, James. I appreciate it. Yeah, so that's awesome. So how, I guess, I don't know. I have one more question. Um, how would something like that be used? Why is that useful? Why do we need that in WASI?
Yeah, so one of the use cases that we had was essentially folks wanted to be able to make a request via their kind of ORM. So in .NET, wanted to use Azure SQL ORM to be able to communicate, and that requires TLS communication back to the SQL Server database. And so, yeah, so the proposal right now is a very high level protocol. So you don't actually get into the weeds of like seeing too much of the certificates and things. You set up a couple streams and pass them off, and you write into then you end up writing and reading from those streams. So we're keeping it very high level, and then handing off that implementation details to the runtime or the host to implement. So
Does anyone have any questions?
yeah, there's a link. I posted it in the agenda, and looks like Sven also posted it in the chat here. Oh, yeah, sorry, I guess we need to update the README. We merged the WIT. So if you look in the WIT folder there, it is in there. So I'll take that as an action item to clean up the README.
Awesome. Um, I will take the lack of hands raised that there aren't any questions. Um, awesome. So let's see. Thank you so much, James, and thank you for those explanations. That's very helpful. Let's see. I believe Taylor, did you add the follow-up on the previous action items?
Yeah, I didn't put my name next to it because it's
Okay.
something we generally should be doing, so I just put it there. But I just wanted to follow up on the getting people to come present at the this meeting because I wanted to make sure we could they're rebooting the tags. That was the other thing I was going to mention. They're rebooting the tags, which means like the current tag leadership will be there. So we have Ricardo and Steven who are over at the tag runtime who we interface with a lot as the co-chairs. Um, and the the thing that we're going to need to do is make sure we're like this sounds so terrible. I'm just going to say this, and it sounds so business speak, but you all get it. We have to show our value, and so like we want to make sure we're showing that, and we do. We have plenty of things that we have here. We just need to be better at getting them all together. So the plan was to have these recordings that we'll start off with, and then once we've gotten all of them, we can write. It can pretty much be a 1 or 2 pager, like state of the ecosystem from the stuff we've heard. And so. We need to hear from, I think Calvin, you had talked to, I can't remember who we listed. Let me pull up that uh, action item. But let's see, speakers.
I think it was Starling Monkey, and we were doing something with
Yeah,
P3.
you were talking to Joel, Yosh, and Luke about P3. Um, were you able to talk to them and see if they would be willing to come in? I mean, I can also talk to Victor who's doing it, but I think having a group of them would be
Yeah,
good.
let me follow up again because I need to make it more concrete. Uh, but definitely also the other one was I think Starling Monkey.
Yep. Which David, you'd reached out to, I think, but we're waiting a response last time.
Yeah, let me follow up. I'll definitely get Tomasz in here for the. I think we can get that scheduled for the next meeting.
Okay. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's totally fine. Just put it on whatever dates we have open is with what I've been doing. Um, and then I have talked to Mendy and Sean, and I have talked to the Wasm-wg folks. There's a little bit of like I ask and then I wait a couple weeks, then I have to ask again. So I'm on the asking again phase. So I will double check on those as well. But I want to see if we can get some of those scheduled coming up into here, and then we can start to put together something probably for the CNCF blog, or worst case scenario, output into the tag runtime page of just kind of the update on the Wasm ecosystem. So and just give people the high level, I think, is the plan there. So I just wanted to bring those up. I think those were, I'm just double checking through the other action items here on the we already had one. Joe did the stuff for the Golang and components thing last week, which is really good. But I think that's it. So those were our big action items. So we should probably just make sure we circle back on those and get those scheduled.
Anyone have any questions, comments? Okay. Thank you, Test Master Taylor. Um,
Does that make you little Alex Horn? I mean, sorry. For those who watch the show, you get it. If you don't, doesn't matter.
it looks like Joe had a question in chat. Joe, would you like to speak up or would you like me to? Okay, I will speak. Will WASI TLS be incorporated into WASI HTTP? That's a very good question. James, I'm gonna say you're the expert on this. Do you have any inclination, or actually anybody else? But
No, I wouldn't anticipate it going into HTTP. I mean, I don't know specifically, but I don't see it as part of HTTP. Because HTTP is just a really, really high level API, and you're getting HTTPS by the implementation under the hood. And so you're not interacting with like a stream of data per se. It's kind of my initial thought on that. Right now, I'm not sure where it's going to land, but I would, you know, it's kind of a complement to sockets, and sockets is in CLI, and so that's a potential place for it, but I'm not the authority there. So take that as a grain of salt. And yeah, let's see, these Rust TLS ensures TLS. I wonder if this will be compiled to WASI using TLS. Yeah, so I could show you kind of how we're thinking about it with the .NET API. So right now we've designed it with the JavaScript API along with the .NET API. So .NET has a very high level stream client class, SSL stream, and you read and write from the stream. That's basically it. You can do a little bit of configuration on the handshake. So you can say like, hey, I want to make sure we're using these certs. We're using this type of handshake information, and then you configure it and off you go. And the same thing on the JavaScript side of things. It's in as well designed for that. And so I don't know. I don't think anybody's really specifically looked at the Rust side of things, but would probably be some high level API that they're using there. Yeah. Taylor.
Yeah, so I mean, just related to that, I know that people, one of the things that like the people who we have like at least using Wasm Cloud in production, like the custom certs thing is like always a thing that's going on there. And I mean, I think I can answer this myself, but I'm bringing it up for purposes of discussion. Like, what do we say to those people who see this and go, "Oh, WASI TLS, that's how I'm going to configure my certificates for this." Um, what's kind of a good answer we can give to them? Like I said, I can probably answer this myself, but I'm totally asking this as a plant.
In what scenario, I guess, is like, are they configuring it for what?
It's exactly what Joe was putting in the examples in code. That someone comes in, you know, they're in an enterprise, big enterprise, their enterprise has a custom set of certs or things that they expect to have, and they expect to be able to go in and traditionally speaking, how that works is with like, you know, the client builders, right? Where a client or the server will say, okay, I'm serving with this certificate bundle and this thing, or use this chain of trust, or yada yada yada. Um, and so people using WASI HTTP are going to be like, where's my certs? Where's my things I configure? And so what do we tell people for that when they ask those questions? And how do we educate people? That make more
Yeah.
sense?
Yep. Yeah, so if you're using the WASI TLS, then you'd be able to configure the chain of trust and all those types of things. As far as like how that interacts with HTTP, right now there is no story there. I don't know if there's any story on the WASI HTTP for setting up those types of chains of trust in the communication protocols like that. Yeah, and Joe, there is a bunch in the previous PR. There's a whole long list of examples, and you can find, let me see if I can find the previous PR where this is all discussed. We just haven't moved everything over yet. We're trying to get everything up, bootstrapped up and set up before we go doing too much there. Go ahead, David.
so to clarify, when you were saying that you can configure your cert bundle, what you're saying is the runtime or the OS that you're running the runtime on is where you're going to configure your cert bundle. Is that what you're saying? As opposed to the application or the application specifying a cert bundle, or perhaps a file from the file store to use a cert bundle, you're saying that it should be, or that currently is at the runtime level.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that'll be an interesting discussion. I do see that, you know, as folks have their own cert chains, that's definitely something you want to configure your apps for, and maybe an app by app basis, as opposed to like all the apps running within a given runtime, perhaps. Um, I look forward to that. But I think this is moving in a great direction, and it's really cool to start seeing like, hey, like use Rust TLS or listen and serve TLS. This lighting these things up is really fantastic for the community, for people building apps. Taylor, your hand is raised.
Yeah, I mean, I would say just for purpose of discussion here, just so people have it out there, it is configured at the host level, but I think it can be configured per app. It's the whole idea of like Spin has the Spin config. I don't know all the cert stuff there. Wasm Cloud has links, and all those things can be used to specify. And I think that's honestly the right approach for this is to have like that configured at that level, and that's why. But I think it might be really good for the WASI TLS stuff, James, if you like clarify like this is specifically for like TLS encrypted sockets. Like this is like the TLS stream, like you're talking about, that exists in pretty much every language. There's an equivalent, um, because that's the I think that's the key differentiator. And from an educational perspective, it might be good to have those examples because I don't think it means that the host has to use the everything that's on the system it's running on chain. It can by default if you want it to, but I think the configurability of that is something easily doable because underneath the hood, if you're doing it in Rust or whatever, you'll just configure the hyper or request or whatever if you're doing an HTTP client or if you're doing a server with those things that are passed in via whatever configuration mechanism you use. So I think that would be just something to call out, just for educational purposes, because I think people, when we're dealing with interfaces, I've noticed that it's still one of those things that's hard to explain to people. It's like, no, like things are now at different levels. All the things still exist, but they've been moved around to different levels. So that's all I would say on it. And I could not type that down, so I'll go try to type that in a second.
Yeah, and I don't know for configuring like your HTTP and that type of stuff. Is there any plans for the WASI HTTP to do any type of configuration at that interface layer?
Not that I know of. And I honestly don't think it should. I do think it's better to keep that like external to the like as like a configuration that's passed in. Um, just in terms of keeping the spirit of like the interface clean and easier for people to use. Um, right, because all these things, including the TLS thing, lets you do like instead of like all the construction and all the other things you normally have to do, you kind of just say, okay, here it is, and the thing handles the resources for you. So I think that's a good thing we should keep doing.
I'm going to play devil's advocate and say that it's having small components that you can compose together is a good thing. And at some point, if you were to provide TLS to the HTTP implementation, perhaps that would be that would be that would make sense from a composability standpoint, and is often how other languages like other runtimes end up doing it, or how it's structured. Say for .NET or Java or other languages end up saying, okay, hey, you want to give me your certificate stack or your cert bundles and your TLS stream and configuration, then I'll use that. It seems to make sense at some point. I think it would be logical eventually to get there, but to keep as much of a clean default interface as possible. Like if you think about like when you create a new HTTP client, you just get the defaults. And to me, that makes a ton of sense. If you want to have those configurations on your construction of that object, then yeah, cool, high five. Probably just comes with maturity. As things mature and we figure out where pieces fit together a little bit better. It makes a lot of sense. And the simplicity of the TLS implementation seems to lend itself well to being a component in a larger composition.
That was the general idea. And when they were voting on it, one of the comments was that some of the folks who have like C level APIs need something lower level than what we've proposed with WASI TLS. But this meets like the higher level languages that have these SDKs, and it's going to fit into that part of the ecosystem. And maybe at some point, the WASI crypto might provide all the lower level things that folks need to be able to build those lower level APIs. And so there'll be kind of different layers at which you're operating at here. And you can choose the right one that works for you.
James, who knew you were going to be the center of attention today? And thank you so much for your patience in answering our questions. Let's see. Unless anybody has a follow-up to that, shall we move on? All right. So we have reached the end of our agenda. At this point, we generally, set action items for the next time around. I think our action item today, and correct me if anybody. Oh, Taylor, please follow.
Joe brought up something in the chat, so I just wanted to bring that up, make sure it got talked about.
Yeah, before we move on, let's address that. So, side note, in the last Run WASI community meeting, Kate had a question about schema for labeling OCI artifacts for Wasm. James, do you remember the context? Should we discuss it here?
I unfortunately actually do have context here, James. I'm not sure if that will help, but I actually have a link to this. So there's been work done. So I know that Yash has done some work on this, and I need to find where he documented this in the Wasm conventions thingamajigger. Right now, if you're using any of the whackage stuff, what I just linked is what we do. Those are the things we set from the metadata that's in the Wasm artifact to OCI mappings. And then let me pull up the other one. So Wasm tool conventions. I have to look this up every time. Tool conventions. Okay, there it is. There is. Did this get merged? Sorry, I am trying to find it because you caught me with not having that done. Anyway, there is something that Yash has worked on, basically is what it comes down to, that has some standards for what they could be. They're actually fairly straightforward as far as I understand, but the whole point was that we could take the mappings in either direction and automatically map them back out. So that's what we do inside of whackage, is that we take the those things on the if there's any metadata on the component, it gets automatically put into the normal open containers annotations. And you could technically do the same thing on the way back. Though that's a little bit less common, but the whole point is those fields are fairly standard. And if I can find where that's at, I will send it. And then, but like, anyway, that's what we're doing there.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've seen Yash's work going into the Wasm tools, so that's great. I think the context for Kate's question was more about, and I'm not sure I'm prepared to talk about it here today, but was in the spin shim, one of the things that they're trying to implement and add functionality for is the ability to essentially take two different components and then compose them on the fly. And the I forget what the actual terminology in the spin languages, but essentially taking two components that are in a thing and then composing them together at the runtime. So they're taking two different layers from the OCI spec, from the OCI, and putting them together. I think one of the questions that came up was like, if we have these, we're having some trouble. And so one of the proposals that I had was, at least as a workaround, one of the things we could potentially do to get this moving initially was to pre-compose those and push them as a single component. So something else would manage that for you, and you essentially just push the final binary that's already been composed, and that gets run. The question kind of was like, how are we thinking about, through the spec that we've published, how are we thinking about these? I think, Taylor, you've used the word expanded components, and what's going to be included in the imports and exports of the expanded component, and how do they reference other ones and that type of thing. Yeah, so I don't know that I'm fully prepared to discuss it further, but that was kind of the context of what Kate was bringing up, I think. And maybe we need to bring in Kate and is it for the other guy's name that's working on the feature. But yeah.
I mean, contextually speaking for that, like, I know that if we're talking about the exploded components thing, that's kind of a different story because, that's kind of out of the realm of OCI. It's in terms of like the explosion part, but the layers would be in there, like you're saying. And we left that open because of two reasons. Number one, we haven't had, like, the throughput in the Wasm community is not particularly large, so we have to spend our time wisely. And number two, the tooling doesn't really quite exist. I mean, it does. You can look at things and you can, like, can you do it? Yes, but is there a way to go like Wasm tools component explode or whatever? No, there's not a way to do that right now. There's not like easy ways for that to be there, and I'm assuming there's some nuances. And so I'm all game if someone's ready to start doing that and taking that on to like reopen the conversation as revving the next version of the OCI data that we talked about, because we did explicitly leave the space there for us to be able to explode. I think the only thing we're leaning towards is that, like, item 0 in the array of layers is like the entry point, like the first thing you should look at, and then it can look at everything else and smush them all together as it pleases. But I would want to have that's open to change, obviously, and so we should just have that conversation there. So, like, if it's the metadata, that's a fairly like known issue. If it's the exploding and re-imploding and all that stuff, that probably deserves a bigger discussion. In like with people who are interested in the OCI side.
Is there anything you wanted to add to that, or? Brian. I knew his name was Fibonacci, but on the thing, but I didn't know his actual name. Brian was doing the implementation for the spin folks.
Yeah, I'd be curious if the purpose was to store like two unique components, or if it was meant to be like the exploded imploded view, because I think those are two different stories that should be addressed. Because when we created the OCI spec, if I remember right, James, the whole point was like each thing is its own component. Now, if you explode it so that you can say, like, this is my component that I want to be able to run or use or provide to somebody else to compose in with theirs, and the exploding is for data deduplication and being able to like just have the flexibility of like popping out a piece when you get all the pieces and saying I'm going to pop in this piece instead. Um, that was the purpose of it, but it wasn't meant to be like, here, I'm going to shove my 3 parts of my application into a single image was the initial go around there because it felt like it was kind of polluting the things there. Now I'm not opposed to having a second thing that says this is an application, but I feel like that might be a little bit more thorny because applications are represented differently by every type of thing.
Yeah, I think in particular, this part was, hey, you have this reusable component and you have it as a layer, and then you have this other one, and those two plug together. Not so much as the different applications. I know Spin does have the different application thing, so that's probably something that needs to happen at some point here, but like it was like you have this common component and it's a layer, and you might use that across multiple apps, but you wanted to store it separately. So and I guess eventually, like I think Wasm Cloud does this, is like, hey, oh well, actually we don't want to use that layer, we're going to use our own when you actually go to run it, type thing. So yes, I think it's that, like composing it's the full application, but it has two different components in it that plug together to make the wider application. But maybe we can, I'll reach out to Kate and see if we want to bring folks in here and have a conversation about what the needs are.
Yeah, I'm very much in favor of that. I feel like that's an interesting like nuanced conversation because it gets into the point of like why, like WARG existed in the first place, right? Was the point of like, and that's what this initial thing was. It's like you have your components, you pick from your library of components and compose them together. But like there could be a good argument for putting these as, like I said, a separate type or however we want to approach it. So I think we have the conversation with the interested parties. Count me in for that too, because I would be an interested party, and we can see what that looks like.
The requisite 15 seconds has passed in silence. Anything else that we'd like to cover on that topic? Definitely an interesting topic, and one of the things that we, that are thought about for a long time, and why we're using OCI and being able to dedupe many of these layers, and how we can do that effectively and still promote a great experience for WebAssembly. Awesome. Cool. Let's see. Action items. Let's see. We need to follow up with our contacts for scheduling next meeting. That means if you're on the hook, you probably want to get commitment this week. It always sneaks up on you. I know it does me. I'll get to like the end of like the previous week before the meeting, and I'm like, okay, I gotta go contact people, and by that time it's too late. So be proactive, please, if you're working on this stuff or if you'd like to get content in. So yeah, thank you all. Calvin, I feel like we haven't talked to you today. It is really good to see you.
Good to see you guys. Is anybody going to the CG? What the W3C CG Wasm CG in San Francisco?
Today? Oh, the meetup. You?
Yeah, but I was just hoping I'd see some of you guys in person again.
Sorry, not this time around. Yeah, I think the next travel for me is probably KubeCon.
You gonna go to IO?
We'll see. I have not gotten approval for that yet. I'd love to. It would be fantastic, and Barcelona is always fantastic that time of year. So yeah. As we start to approach those, we should probably call together talks and hey, here's some really cool stuff out there. or at least just a few highlights or something.
Sounds good. Yeah, sorry, I was been heads down and quiet on this stuff because I'm mostly focused on JCO P3 stuff right now, trying to get that over the line.
I have heard. Very exciting. I'm I'm sorry. I will digress just a moment. So were you working on asyncifying?
On Friday, I got JSPI, JavaScript Promise Integration, merged into JCO. Asyncify I pulled out temporarily, but I do have an implementation of that. I have the WASI Preview 2 shims. Still, I need to get those in that are async, but I'm already starting to look at the ABIs for P3 and putting that into JCO. So I wanted to work on that a bit more and remove some of the unknowns before looking at asyncify and the other pieces again, because I know some of the code needs to change around this in a few different ways. But I know the second runtime thing is gonna be a blocker if we don't move it along. So that's I have some legitimate like uses that I want to I care about using this in production. So it's more than just that stamp of approval. So
That's awesome. Looking forward to see all the cool things you're building.
yeah. Well, we're actually going to have some good use cases of this stuff, hopefully at the end of March. So something around Wasm-IO time. So, which hopefully we land P3 at the end of March too. So cool.
Thanks, Calvin. All right, without further ado, I will say let's move to close the meeting. Anybody second? All right. Well, it's been fantastic today. Thank you so much, y'all. Really appreciate y'all. And yeah, if you're out there and you want to talk some WASM, come join us. Love to hear you. All right, everybody. Cheers.